So by the late 1700s, Dr. Dobson had taken his patient's urine and came to the conclusion that sugar was present in it. Meanwhile, a Scottish doctor named Dr. Francis Home was also experimenting with diabetic patients. And maybe he had heard about the project that Dr. Dobson had done because he started to do something also a little unconventional. In 1780, Dr. Home started fermenting the urine of his patients with yeast to make beer. Yes, he would mix half a pint of yeast with 24 pints of one of his patients' urine, just in case you're wanting the recipe at home. And Dr. Home wrote that, quote, "It soon began to ferment and exit a vapor, like fermenting liquors. Next day, it fermented strongly. On the third, their fermentation seemed over. It had lost all sweetness and tasted like small beer." So should we just be turning all the urine into beer? I mean, okay. Small beer just means low alcohol beer. That's what that means. Now that everyone and their mother knew that there was like literally sugar in the urine of diabetics, doctors were determined to figure out, well, where is it coming from? And most importantly, how to stop all these poor people from dying a terrible death. So all these experimental treatments start popping up. But again, they're pretty extreme. For example, doctors believe that you could get rid of diabetes by going on a diet of starvation. Yes, doctors were literally prescribing patients to starve. Yep. Sometimes doctors were prescribing less than 300 calories per day. This meant that patients would just starve to death before the diabetes could kill them. There were other diets besides the starvation ones, but they weren't very appetizing. An army surgeon named Dr. John Rollo, I think it is, published a book with a diet for diabetics that consisted of mostly animal meat and fat. You could have something called suet, which is a hard white animal fat that comes from the kidneys of cows and sheep. You could also have lard, butter, and blood pudding. Dr. Rollo also suggested eating as much rancid or rotten meat as your stomach could handle. For best results, the book suggested patients also have a little nighttime cocktail made of opium, aloe vera, soap, and laxative wine. That's quite the mixture, right? I know. Now, all this was supposed to help treat the diabetes, but none of them, they were all, again, just trying new things. Like, hey, if you starve, will that fix the diabetes? If you eat raw meat, will that fix the diabetes? That's where we're at right now. None of these diets make sense to us, but again, the idea was to prevent the formation of sugar in the body, especially with that last one, by pooping it out first with the laxative. Now, this was actually seen as a pretty big step in the treatment of diabetes, and even though the diet was dangerous and extreme, in some cases, patients actually did recover from some diabetes symptoms, but mostly in patients with type 2 diabetes. Now, if you had type 1, this diet didn't do very much. From this point on, doctors believed the most important method of treating diabetes was through diet. At this point, there was lots of theories on what was causing diabetes. My personal favorite theory was that diabetes was caused by excess of venery, meaning too much sex. That they believe that's what caused diabetes, was too much sex. In the doctors' minds, anything sinful or pleasurable was connected to diabetes. Like, for example, smoking or drinking too much. And again, sex, diabetes. But that theory didn't really hold up because there were diabetic patients who claimed to be virgins. And this confused doctors. And they're like, but too much sex gives you diabetes. You're a liar, But it really debunked this wild theory. But after decades of doctors recommending sketchy diets and abstinence, there was finally a scientific breakthrough. In 1889, two German scientists, Oskar Minkowski and Josef von Mering, had been experimenting in the field of diabetes. And they had a hunch that something called the pancreas might be connected to the root cause. So they decided to perform a procedure to remove the pancreas from a dog. Now, after the surgery, even though the dog was house trained, the dog started peeing everywhere. And I guess Dr. Minkowski yelled at the man who worked in their lab because it was supposed to be his job to take the dog out and make sure it went potty, But the lab worker told Dr. Minkowski it didn't matter how much he took this dog on walks, he was still peeing everywhere. Minkowski tested the dog's urine, and sure enough, it was full of sugar. By removing the pancreas, Dr. Minkowski and Dr. Mering had given this dog type 1 diabetes. I know, sadly, though, the dog died shortly after his pancreas was removed. Just wanted to shout out to that dog. He really, though, solved the mystery to diabetes, so yeah. In the eyes of an angel. Look, though, this unlocked the key to solving diabetes. I mean, the pancreas was the key. So that's in my intro. I think I said liver, and I think pancreas is what he said. Either way, pancreas was the key. Finally, a clue that wasn't based on drinking or making people eat rotten meat or opium, Before Dr. Minkowski and Dr. Mering made this discovery, most people literally had no clue what a pancreas was or what it did. Many scientists believed it was sort of like a leftover organ that used to have a purpose, but then over the course of evolution became kind of useless. I would say like a pinky toe, but your pinky toe is actually really important for balance. So it's not like a pinky toe. But the connection between diabetes and the pancreas was undeniable. Unfortunately for the dog community, the experiment was repeated and had the same results. Without a pancreas, you would develop diabetes and then sadly die. Even though it seemed like science was getting closer to figuring out the cause, they still weren't any closer to a cure. It was this huge mystery that no one could solve. Then, after decades of experiments and tests, a miracle drug was invented.